So Joseph,
We don't have pens.
nobody has pens. Kai, would you like to rectify that?
I shall rectify that
Thank you.
problem.
Ariana, do you know what we did today? Melon and I and some other folks raised $500.
At our church
And we're gonna go to Appalachia and we're gonna build houses for people.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Wow.
That's
Gonna
good.
fix houses.
Bill.
Fix houses.
Appalachia.
And they're not really gonna be.
Appalachia. I don't know how do you pronounce that the correct way.
Yeah.
There is two versions of correct. Appalachia if you're from the north, and Appalachia if you're south of Harper's Ferry. we
Okay,
learned.
well mom says Appalachia as if she's from the south.
This one's perfect.
You're from Wisconsin.
If you're headed to the south, you better
went to
say Appalachia, because if you say Appalachia,
Yeah,
they'll
they're
throw an
Pretty
Appalachia.
much every time. I drive through the Appalachian Mountains every year.
You'll be riding the
That's
bus
my
and
quote of the
saying
day. I gotta write
Appalachia.
that down in my book.
Yeah.
You better say Appalachia in the south, because if you say Appalachia, they'll throw an apple at you.
Yeah, I drive through.
Oh
I drive through the Appalachian Mountains every year on my way
I'm
to
gonna work
Georgia.
on some principle.
Yeah, I definitely use Appalachia because
Yep.
I'm going through Tennessee.
Yep.
Tennessee.
Well, that's the funny part, though.
All right, so Joseph is the oldest son of the favorite wife, but he actually ends up being like one of the youngest sons of Jacob, as it turns out, because Rachel had such a hard time having children. Yes.
Oh, I had a sudden thought last time. I never said it though. So, Isaac was Abraham's favorite son, or Sarah's favorite son, and then Jacob was Rebecca's favorite son, and then Joseph was his dad's favorite son. Do you think there's like a connection, like favoritism?
Possibly.
Oh, what's with all this favoritism?
Yes.
No, but what's
Not highly recommended. So with Abraham and Isaac, like Isaac was Sarah's only son, only child at all, and so for her to have a favorite is not too insignificant, and she's definitely going to favor her son over Ishmael
Yeah.
because of the politics of the family. What's interesting is the Jacob and Esau one, where the father Isaac liked Esau better. They just had a stronger connection emotionally, and Rebecca was definitely favored Jacob.
So, does that mean that, like, even though all parents say, like, I love you all equally, does that mean that, like, deep down inside that there's favorites?
Yeah.
Because it's in the Bible.
Yeah. I'm not gonna.
You know, one of the lessons that I take from the book of Genesis is the dysfunction and broken relationships that result from having favored children, because Ishmael and Hagar got exiled. Esau and Jacob had a falling out so bad that Esau wanted to kill Jacob, and Jacob fled for 20 years. Like, that's not small and insignificant, and that would be like him getting past lunar orbit as far as how far away in number of days he was from his family. And then we're going to learn today about all of the difficulties of Joseph, and that's at the very, very beginning. So he's like 17-ish years old, and he has two dreams. One of them is he and his brothers are harvesting a field of wheat, and all of his brothers' sheaves bow down to his sheaf. And this didn't go over well with the boys.
Well, why would he tell them? Like, that's obviously going to cause problems.
Well, he was 11-ish.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the VeggieTale interpretation is amazing and awesome and accurate. Everybody reads in their opinion of this story into the story, and the thing that strikes me is how little commentary on motivation and everything else that comes across in Genesis. Joseph has a dream from God. He realizes this is a dream from God, and that's worth sharing. Whether he did it out of arrogance and pride, or whether he did it out of sheer surprise, is not actually known. But he does share it. And then he has another dream where not only do 11 stars bow down to him, but also the sun and the moon, which his father interprets to mean him and his mother. His mother's actually dead at this point, which is also unique. But
Wait, how does his mom die?
in childbirth with Benjamin, she had hard labor and didn't survive the process.
That's unfortunate.
So between this and the special coat that he got from his father, that only he got and his brothers didn't get, his brothers ended up despising him. Now this is an interesting little Hebrew tidbit. The King James translated that his coat as a coat of many colors. Nobody knows what kind of coat that was because that word is only used that one time in the entire Old Testament. And so there's no other context to understand what it means. It was a special coat of some sort. It wasn't necessarily rainbow colored. It wasn't necessarily technicolor. It was special in some
Joseph and
fashion.
the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Right.
That musical's
Coat
fun.
of sea cows? Or
No, it wasn't that. That's another one example of those words, though. Anyhow, so he has a special coat that definitely signifies that he is the favored son, and it doesn't go well. So his brothers cook up all kinds of evil ideas. The first option is to kill him. They put him in a cistern of water to begin with and don't actually kill him. Judah was going to try and get him, or was it Reuben? Reuben was intending to get him out. Judah comes up with the idea, let's sell him off to the Ishmaelites because we can get money for our brother, and he's our brother. We really shouldn't kill him, right? So-
okay, so let's just sell him.
Yep,
Like,
so they sell him for 20 shekels of silver, which is reminiscent of the price that Jesus fetched for Judas, who was betrayed 2,000 years later almost.
Wow.
Hmm?
What a coinky dink.
Yes.
Inflation
So, yeah. I think Judas might have gotten 30 pieces of silver, so there's a little inflation over 1,700 years, but anyhow, he gets sold to the Ishmaelites, and the brothers say, look, we found this. Examine it and see if it belongs to your son. And they let Jacob interpret what happened, and Jacob says, oh, that is my son's coat. A wild animal has surely torn him to pieces. So they didn't lie, they just let Jacob cook up the story, and they didn't correct him.
Didn't they like dip it in blood?
Yep, it was dipped in blood and torn. So they gave it a strong impression as to what might have happened. But Joseph then gets sold to Potiphar, an official down in Egypt, and Potiphar prospers because Joseph is in charge of all of his household goods, and things are going very well. Potiphar's wife tries to seduce Joseph. Joseph says no, so then she makes up a false story. He gets accused and thrown in prison, which is better than getting killed, but he is still now in prison. And he does so well there, the warden puts him in charge of the entire prison. So I don't know how he's doing time on the inside, but he is then managing the prison.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you do so well in a prison that you get put in charge of it? Like,
Different concept back in the day.
yeah.
So, anyway, this illustrates in the map here how he traveled. Jacob originally had left his father's encampment in the south and moved north in the land of Canaan there to Dothan, where he found his brothers. That's where they sell him off to the Midianite traders, and then the Midianites take him down to Egypt through that route, most likely because that's the common trade route of the day. The crazy thing about it is that Joseph would have come within 3 miles of his father's encampment on the way to Egypt, just a little less than or a little more than shouting distance, but he would have been able to see his home and his household and his family off in the distance on his way to slavery in Egypt, which would have been challenging, I suspect. Kind of like being from Hammond and getting taken through Baldwin, where you can see the Hammond Water Tower, and like it's just over there. But
Get taken south to River Falls for slavery.
yes, South
Mighty
River Falls.
monkeys, so many.
Actually, Iowa probably, but you know.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's the distance that those people had to walk?
Thereabouts. Iowa would be about the right, someplace in Iowa.
Because I had to get my Bible, not weird.
No, well, Brian, you're not weird, you promise?
I just
We know better, but we love you.
All right, so while Joseph is in prison in Egypt, a baker and the cupbearer from Pharaoh's household get thrown in prison and put in his charge, and they both have dreams. He interprets their dreams, favorably for the cupbearer, not so favorably for the baker. The dreams actually are fulfilled exactly how he interprets them, when he says they will be fulfilled. And he says, remember me to the cupbearer when the cupbearer goes back into Pharaoh's service, but the cupbearer forgets Joseph for 2 years until Pharaoh has dreams. And Pharaoh has some serious dreams that trouble him, and the magicians are not able to interpret them. And so the cupbearer is like, so there was a day that you were not in, or didn't think very highly of me, and I was in prison because of your opinion of me. And there was a guy there who was able to interpret my dreams. And Pharaoh says, send for him at once.
Do the magicians normally be able to interpret dreams?
Usually.
Usually?
Or what they thought was an interpretation.
Yeah. Sometimes the omens would conflict with each other, and that would be a lack of interpretation. So their interpretation skills were pretty crazy. You kill a cow, and then you pull its liver out, and depending on the shape of the liver and whether it's got this lobe, that lobe, or another lobe that means this, that, or the other thing. I'm not real sharp on how you interpret cow livers and to such, but that was one of their ways of divining, what something meant. And kings and generals were very astute at how to manipulate these so that they could either cast to or portray to their army that we have the favor of the gods or we don't have the favor of the gods, thus we are going to do such and such.
What's the point of going to a magician to get your dream interpreted if you're just gonna manipulate it to your favor? Like, why would you waste your time? Why not just keep the dream to yourself?
Well, it kind of depended on the king and whether they believed what they were doing or didn't. And some did and some didn't. This Pharaoh apparently believed that he had a dream from the Lord, or a dream from the gods at very least. And he was like, this is serious, we need to know what this one meant. And it was true, it was serious, he needed to know what this one was going to mean. And he had 2 dreams, and Joseph interpreted them. He said they're one and the same. You're going to have 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And famine so severe that all the years of plenty will be completely forgotten. And he then suggested that they save up and store up all the food in the years of plenty so that they can eat during the years of famine. And Pharaoh's like, this guy's a genius, let's put him in charge, and Joseph becomes essentially the prime minister of Egypt. So that was a good day's promotion, going from convicted prison warden type person to prime minister of Egypt.
Prison warden type.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what he was.
yeah, that's what he was.
I didn't watch it until I was a child.
It was the best. Did they have all the pizzas with the
Do you have this one?
Yes.
You guys watched VeggieTales?
No,
We're nerds.
yeah.
I was
VeggieTales was the bomb.
Yes, it was the bomb.
You're right, because it was yep,
Mm-hmm.
yep.
This is striking a few memories. I don't think I watched this one as many times as I watched other
No.
ones.
Yeah, I
So we'll
didn't
have
either.
to pull this
I think
one
I
out of
still
the
saw it.
archives.
I agree.
All right. We'll put this on the agenda for a future evening to watch said VeggieTale. So,
As we should.
yes. So the famine was severe, and it was severe not just in Egypt, but everywhere else. So this would be a crisis of climate issues where farmers plant and then there's not rain for the food to grow. Or in Egypt in particular, this would mean that the flooding failed, because the way the Egyptian agricultural system worked is there'd be 2 months of flooding where all the fields are fertilized and there's lots of water, and they grab a hold of a lot of the water, store it up for irrigation, because it doesn't rain in Egypt. And if the flooding fails, there's nothing you're growing that year. And
Thank you, Mr. Sanita, for teaching us that last year.
funny. So Mr. Semino covered this one.
Oh yeah.
Good.
Yes, that's all. It was probably the only thing that I'll remember from that.
No, I
entire
remember.
year.
Ironically, they built the Aswan Dam, and they don't have any flooding in Egypt at all anymore. But they do have a lot of irrigation water that they can make use of if they want to. But that's beside the point. Back then, they did not have said dam. But anyway, in Canaan, this famine is very severe. They eat all their food for a year, but in the second year of the famine, they have to go down to Egypt to buy food. And they do not recognize Joseph, their brother. Now this is quite a few years later after he's been there for a while. Yes,
How many years do you think you've been that?
it's on your timeline, actually. So Joseph was 17 when he went down to Egypt.
Wait, you know that?
Yeah, we know this.
How?
It says when Joseph was 17 years old, all these things happened.
That would,
hmm
Looks like your age.
So on the timeline, how old is it when he has the dreams? 1738? 28. And then when does the famine, or the 7 years of plenty begin?
1750.
1750? 15?
Yeah.
So that's 13 years later. And then the 7 years of famine begin in 1708?
Yeah.
Yep.
Dang, so Joseph was in
So in 1707.
Egypt for like 30 years solid.
Oh, Joseph? No, he was there for
Where?
93 years.
What?
Joseph was in Egypt for 93 years of his
11
life.
years.
He was there for 30 years.
30.
Oh.
28.
28? When it begins?
When his brothers come back.
When his brothers come
Or
back.
17.
Can I see that? I haven't looked at this recently enough. 1728, he's sold into slavery. 21 years go by before he, so 17 and 21, 38. Yep, so Joseph is 38 when his brothers come back. So, the boy changed. He was not longer looking like Mackay, he was looking more like me. But his brothers didn't recognize him
He
because,
also probably had a beard, like he's probably.
well, he was in Egyptian style.
Oh, you're all
Culturally
yeah.
differential,
Yeah,
like they
you're
were so
right.
different.
Yeah. So
Instead of beards, they had golden beards.
Goatees and they'd shave their
They
heads.
like
and-
no, I'm not Johnson. They literally had these sticks coming out of their chin. It's
Yep,
like,
it was crazy fashion back in the day. So it's on the second year of the famine that all of the drama takes place, and this is a long drawn out story. If you want to read some extra, you can get the detailed version of it in
hi, Ariana's mom.
bringing us a key. Thank you. The detailed version is in Genesis like 39 through 50, but his brothers go down there, and Joseph hangs on to Simeon, sends him back, and says, "You won't get any more food unless you bring your younger brother Benjamin with you," because he wants to verify Benjamin's actually alive and they're telling the truth. They didn't sell Benjamin off into slavery too.
What?
And so
What is wrong with these people?
exactly, what is wrong with my brothers? They sold me their brother into slavery, and so he's checking up on Benjamin. So
Okay, now
yep,
that-
they
that
bring
actually makes a
Benjamin
lot of
down,
sense.
and so then Joseph makes it so it looks like they're gonna have to keep Benjamin, and he's gonna be imprisoned. And Judah, the brother, is like, "No, this cannot happen. Our father's life is tied up in the well-being of Benjamin, his favorite son, and we will never be able to return to our father's household. He will die if we do, and if we go back there without bringing Benjamin. Keep me instead of Benjamin, and let Benjamin go free."
Okay, but like, after Joseph went away, did he just be like, well, that one's gone, like, this was my new favorite? Was it like that?
Something like that,
What?
yes.
That's a...
Oh my
Well,
god.
basically-
He had a favorite wife,
Yeah.
and Benjamin was the only memory of that favorite wife left, because Joseph is gone, his wife is gone, he's living in a lot
It's
of
like
grief.
His last hope and
Yep.
last source of joy.
Yep,
Just move down the list, I guess.
something like that.
I feel bad for the least favorite. Was it Gad? It was probably Gad. That name.
Gad seems. Gad was actually born to one of the concubine, or not concubine, one of the
Maidservants, yeah.
maidservants.
So he's most likely the least favorite.
If
I
you-
can tell Gad.
If you read the blessings of Jacob, you find actually Levi and Simeon were the least favored ones, and
I
there's
have
a
an
good
uncle
reason
named
for
Levi.
that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Reuben wasn't too favored either.
Reuben was not in good graces either. So Judah is the fourth born from Leah, and he proves his worth in this moment because he offers himself up as a sacrifice on Benjamin's behalf. Notice what this sounds like.
Oh yeah, where have I heard that before?
He's a type of Christ, offering himself up on behalf of another. And so Judah is enacting this and is giving this symbolism in his actions and his words. But it was a heart thing on his part. He really was willing to take the place of his younger brother on his father's behalf. And so that actually is what earned Judah the rights of the firstborn that passed from Reuben to Simeon to Levi, all three of whom were in their father's bad graces for poor choices.
Obviously, oh my god.
There's a lot of drama in that family. And Judah got the rights of the firstborn. And that is why Judah is where the line of David comes from, and from him the Messiah descends. Not that his household didn't have any drama. He had 3 sons, 2 of them get put to death, and he's supposed to give the wife of these first 2 to the 3rd born son, but he's like, if I give her to these guy or this guy, then my 3rd son's gonna die too. He didn't have any grandchildren yet, and so he didn't do that. And then he ends up mistaking her for a prostitute and sleeping with her, and then she has twins by him. So, yep, the tribe of Judah comes from Judah and his daughter-in-law. So, it was
I thought my Thanksgivings were crazy.
you thought your Thanksgivings were crazy, man. The family reunions were odd and
And
interesting.
then they all went down to Egypt together.
Yes. Yes, then they all go down to Egypt together. And when they move to Egypt, Jacob is 130 years old.
Yeah, okay.
And this is how we're able to figure out the timing of all these events in Jacob's life. So Joseph is 38 years old, Jacob is 130, which means that Jacob was 92 years old when Joseph was born. So he's much later than Isaac. Isaac was 60 when his sons were born, but Abraham was 100 when his son was born.
Wait. Jacob was 92 when Joseph was born?
Yes. Jacob left to go to Paddan Aram when he was 77. He returns 20 years later at the age of 97, and 11 of his sons are born, but Benjamin hasn't been born yet.
Okay, yeah. The fact that he leaves when he's 70 is...
And all 11 of those sons are born in the first 14 years or so of his time in Paddan Aram,
That is crazy.
which is crazy. That's a lot of childbirth really fast. Leah was having a son almost every year, it seemed like. So, anyway, moving on. 17 years later, Jacob is about to die. He calls his sons before him and blesses his sons. You could say that Simeon and Levi get a curse. The way that plays out is quite fascinating. So, Joseph is the one who gets the double portion inheritance. He is the firstborn son of the favorite wife, and so he got that. But Judah had the rights of the firstborn in the sense that he was the first oldest son who had not forsaken his right as birthright from Leah.
So we got like the majority of things? Or...
Oh, it was
He didn't get a double portion, but he got the blessing, and the Messiah came from him.
Oh, he got that one.
Yep.
He was told that he would be ruling over his brothers.
Yep, and he would rule over his brothers, and his descendants did. So Jacob gets buried at Machpelah. He's the 6th person, I think, to get buried there. Abraham and Sarah had both been buried there. Isaac and Rebekah were both buried there. And Leah had been buried there by Jacob earlier, and now he himself gets buried there. And there's this enormous Egyptian processional up to the cave at Machpelah, and all of the natives of the land of Canaan were like, oh my gosh, what's going on? An Egyptian king is being buried in our land, or something like that. It was a very, very big to-do.
Is there an archaeological record of that?
It would be so much fun to discover, wouldn't it? Find the cave of Machpelah. You do a Google search on that.
Theoretically, you could have some Egyptian stuff in there that you'd like, what?
If it wasn't looted,
If it wasn't looted.
it probably was. So Joseph lives on to the age of 110. And before he dies, he foretells of the Exodus, and he commands his descendants to be sure that his bones are not buried in Egypt, but that they were taken up to Canaan. And later we discover that this is what they do, actually. They don't bury him in Egypt, they take him up to Canaan. Any questions on Joseph? All right, so we're going to do a quick overview of the book of Job. So I've got a fun handout here. I believe everybody read 3 chapters out of Job.
Yeah. I felt bad for him.
1, 2, and 42.
Like,
Yes.
dude was just living his life, having a good time. He liked God, and God liked him, and then the devil's just like, I'm gonna use you.
But bro really likes the app. I read through that book before, and it's like,
What is?
bro
This graphic actually illustrates that.
Debates, and they,
Yes.
it's like, 4-page long answers and responses.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting.
Alrighty here. Let me flip this. Alright, so this graphic illustrates the composition of the book of Job here for us. So you can see it in color, and we'll use this in the future when we go through the book of the Psalms too. But just look at the top of that graphic here. So Job is 42 chapters long. 3 chapters are story, and the other 39 are conversation and dialogue, which is why I did not ask you to read all 42 of them, because you get the essence out of 3 of them, and if you want to flesh it out, you can tackle the other parts together or by yourself. So Job 1, Job gets tested. In Job 2, he gets tested again, and in both times he refuses to turn away from God and curse God and die, like his wife tells him to do. And then he goes through 39 chapters of conversation with some people. And this is illustrated in the graphic there that I have there. You have all 42 chapters of Job laid out. So the orange chapters, Job is talking. In the yellow ones,
Just like to yap.
yes, he likes to yap. And Eliphaz is the most talkative of the other friends, and he gets just 4 chapters. Bildad the Shuhite gets 3 chapters. Zophar only gets 2 chapters. This other character by the name of Elihu makes an appearance at the very end of the book, and he goes on for 6 chapters there, from 32 through 37. And then, as usual, God gets the final word, and he speaks to Job specifically in 38, 39, 40, and 41. Then you read the 42. So this is a really long conversation, as you can gather. So look at some of these characters. The interesting thing is that this is like completely independent of Abraham and the people of Israel, it seems like. We don't really know precisely when this took place. The most logical time frame, though, is that it took place sometime between the lifetime of Isaac and the lifetime of Moses. Now, we'll learn with the Exodus, Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness shepherding sheep. The thought is that Moses acquired this story during that 40 years when he was in the wilderness, off in the direction of where Job lived, and that he then took this story to the Israelites in Egypt to explain their sufferings.
I mean, he did have 40 years to wander. It's entirely possible during those 40 years he made his way over towards Babylon, or the region of Babylon where Job was at.
It wasn't in Babylon. It was in the land of Uz. So if you whip out your regional map for the whole
Uz.
Middle East.
These people definitely have fun names. I
Yep.
love
Nope,
the
the
names
next one.
that they have for their towns.
No, that's not a town. That's a land. That's a region. That's like Wisconsin.
Oh, well, the name for their regions. I like
Yep, that
it.
one.
It's very
So the map that
creative.
shows Abraham's journey to the promised land. In the black and white version or the color version. Color version's the easiest one. Job lived down in that lower right corner, south of the Persian Gulf, where it looks just all deserty. Is most likely location.
Oh.
Slightly off the map. And so this would be in the neighborhood of Dubai and the United Arab Emirates and Doha and Qatar and all those places there.
Oh, cool.
Gulf monarchies
So South
and
Korea.
such. That's thought to be where he was living at the time. So going through here, Job himself was living in the land of Uz. Uz was one of the grandsons of Shem. He was an Aramean, which means he could have been somewhere else, but usually the geography parks him south of the Persian Gulf. He has 3 friends here. Eliphaz the Temanite. Taman was one of the grandsons of Esau, who was the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham. And so that's why we know it's post-Abraham story, because some of these characters seem to be related to Abraham. Bildad the Shuhite is probably descended from Shua. He was one of the sons of Abraham by Keturah, his 3rd wife. Remember, Abraham had another wife at the end of his life after Sarai had died and Hagar had been sent away, and he had 6 or 7 sons by her, one of whom was Midian, Another one was Shua.
And he sent them to the east.
And he sent them off to the east with gifts so that they would not be too close to Isaac. And most of them stayed pretty far to the east. The one who didn't was Midian. He was a little to the east, but not very far to the east. Zophar the Naamathite is the one that is hard to pin down any other genealogical connection to. So he's just an extra friend. We don't know who he was related to. But the funny thing is we don't know who Job was related to because he's just Job. Elihu, the son of Barachal, the Buzite, is probably related to Abraham's brother Nahor because Buz was a son of Nahor. It was not Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin was an American astronaut. Buzz, the son of Nahor, was an Aramean. So some of these people seem to live up in the area of Haran, and so it's possible that Job's living in the land of the east was way up there. So, like I said, geography is really hard to pin down. There's a handful of other peoples that are referenced. I think the Chaldeans run off with all of his camels or something like that. That would park him somewhere in the Middle East there, but not specifically anywhere in particular.
Don't.
So, the book of Job is a book of poetry, which means that there's an awful lot of repetition in it, actually, which we will get to in another lesson. Themes of Job, we have suffering and innocence, because Job felt he was innocent and he suffered anyway. Another major theme of the book of Job is the very nature of God himself. Is God just? Is he unjust? Job was claiming he must be unjust because I'm innocent and yet I'm still suffering. His friends,
That's what Job was claiming?
part of the time, got to read through it. He was questioning the justice of God.
I would too.
Yes.
If God
it's-
kept letting
Awful
Satan
things
do
happen.
all this stuff, and then I was like, yeah, I don't blame God. And then God's like, all right, keep
Mhm.
test, like, be so fair.
Yep. And at the same time, we also have the themes of faith and perseverance, because Job never does curse God. He doesn't speak ill of God. He's just questioning things, concerned about things, but he is never saying that God is evil. It also looks at, the role of friends and community, people that we live with. Like his 3 friends come, and Job is so disfigured and messed up that they just sit around him in silence for 7 days before anybody even speaks, which is pretty serious. Have you ever sat down with a friend for 7 days and not shared a single word?
That'd
That
be
like
very
defies
difficult.
American culture. Yes, it'd be very difficult. Very well stated.
Ellen and I would be able to do that. We'd just eat and watch movies and just look at each other. We talk with our eyeballs.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the other things that comes across are the limitations of humanity, because we do not have God's perspective on anything because we are human. We are not God. And we don't know what he's doing and why he is doing it. We like to think we know what he's doing, and we like to know why he's doing it, but we don't always. One of the limitations of humanity that gets discussed in the book of Job. But also, if you look at the fullness of it, in Job 42, we see God restore everything to Job twice over from what he had to start with at the end of the story. And that's one thing to remember in the middle of our suffering, is that we have to remember we're only in the middle of our story, we're not at the end of it. Even if our suffering leads to death, it's not the end of our story, just this chapter. But Job, even while he was on earth yet, received everything back twice over. Now, Ellen.
Didn't he have like a bunch of kids before? Did he just give him like double the amount of kids?
So, yeah, this is the thing I wanted to point out. He has 500 camels to begin with. At the end of the book, he has 1,000 camels. And this is like semi-trucks back in the day. This is lots. He has 1,000 sheep at the beginning. He has 2,000 sheep at the end. At the beginning, he has 7 sons and 3 daughters. And at the end, he also receives 7 sons and 3 daughters. So why do you suspect the discrepancy?
Ever since you daughters you follow the word of God? Twice the quality.
Other thoughts?
Twice
Twice
quality,
the
that's crazy.
quality. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I will say it's
Yeah, alright, stop from the peanut gallery. Other thoughts? Why does Job get 7 sons and 3 daughters rather than 14 sons and 6
Well,
daughters?
maybe Micaiah's onto something. Maybe they were just better.
Like before he had more money, now he has Gucci.
Exactly.
Alright, so let's assume that Micaiah is completely off base and off track.
Oh.
What other alternative interpretations might we have here?
Humans and camels aren't exactly on the same playing field. Like you have a relationship with a person, but you don't have the same kind of relationship with a camel.
That's not necessarily true, Ariana. People can have relationships with camels.
You're talking to people who have horses. So,
I still don't think it's the same thing though.
any other thoughts, Akela?
I don't know. Maybe like his kids were the first things that like got taken away from him, right? Or was it something else first?
He got the reports of losing everything within about 10 minutes of each other, it sounds like. I don't remember if the kids are the first thing he loses or the last thing reported to him that he lost.
I think it was the last.
Yeah, I think she
I would have just like, imagine all your servants come to you and you're like, yeah, some guy stole your camels, yeah, some guy stole your sheep, yeah, a house just crushed down on your entire family. No.
Now your wife is still alive. All your kids.
Yep, your wife is still alive and she's telling you to curse God and die.
Yeah. Do we have to find out what happens to his wife? Like.
She has 10 more kids?
So she like.
Oh my
It's the
goodness.
same wedge.
I'm sorry, what?
It's the same wedge.
We don't know how many wives Job had, only one gets mentioned, so presumably he still has that wife and she still has more children.
20 kids is kind of crazy.
20 kids is kind of crazy for sure.
I think 20.
Ever had anybody come through the birthing center that had 20 kids?
Actually, yes.
What? Were they Mormon?
She probably
No,
can't
it was
disclose
the
that.
20th that was being born.
20th was being born. Okay.
That is.
Did they have money? They must have been.
Alright, so I will close here with my interpretation of why Job only receives 7 sons and 3 daughters back. My interpretation of this is it speaks to the eternal nature of people and our relationship with them and the lack thereof with animals.
Alright. Yeah,
You were on the right track then, okay?
So for real.
So, animals may be eternal, but we don't seem to possess them into eternity, at very least from this, because Job gets them back in double portion, which means the ones he lost were gone. They were no longer his. But he still had 10 children. They had just preceded him into death, and he was going to go join them, but he had not lost them permanently. And so when he received 7 more sons and 3 more daughters, it now brought his grand total up to 20, even though 10 had already passed away. He had not lost them, they were just no longer with him.
So God doubled his children.
So God doubled his children, and he doubled his animals.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like he was never gonna see them again, because he'd see them in like
Mhm.
heaven or
So
whatever.
it's like starting point, ending point starts
Right.
with 7
Yep.
tensions.
So you have 1,000 sheep, you lose 1,000 sheep, you have 0 sheep. But you have 10 sons, you lose 10 sons, you still have your 10 sons, they just preceded you.
Real.
Yes.
That's a good
So-
interpretation.
It's something that is actually important to remember when parents go through loss. It was kind of amusing at the youth retreat this last spring. We were asking all kinds of deep, heavy questions, and so the moderator's like, all right, let's lighten it up a bit. How many kids do you have? And I said, I have 10. 4 that preceded me into eternity and 6 that are still with me. And he didn't know what to say to that because he was not anticipating that. Goes on to the next guy, and the next guy's like, just waiting for everyone to catch up with that because my wife and I lost 4 in miscarriages that preceded us into eternity. But we still have 6. But that means we totally have 10. We just don't know 4 of them yet.
The
But
entire
we will.
room did not know what to think of
Uh-huh.
that. And
Yes.
everyone was just dead silent, like, what did he just say?
Yep. So
Oh.
it's a different way of thinking about death. So, all right. Any final questions or thoughts on Job?